Do you want your business to grow faster? Are you open to new and out-of-the-box ways to drive revenues and increase value? How do you imagine the most successful entrepreneurs and business leaders double, triple, or expand their businesses tenfold or more? The answer is deals. This is a weekly podcast featuring conversations with business owners, executives, and leaders as we reveal behind-the-scenes details that give you, our listeners, the confidence to pursue your own deal-driven growth. On the show, we discuss a huge variety of deals, everything from large, complex mergers and acquisitions to smaller deals that you can do even without significant capital. My name is Corey Kupfer, and I've been supporting deal-driven growth for businesses for 35 years as a successful entrepreneur, professional negotiator, and attorney. My goal is to help you strategize, plan for, find, and complete deals that will help your company grow faster. Welcome to the Deal Quest podcast. Let's get started. Jeff Dekko is the CEO of Wealth Enhancement Group, which is an independent wealth management firm offering comprehensive and customized financial planning and investment management services. Now serving more than 50,000 households, the company has over 85 offices nationwide and is expanding rapidly through organic growth and acquisitions. Founded in 1997, Wealth Enhancement Group specializes in providing retail clients with team-based knowledge and resources they need to simplify their financial lives. Jeff, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So listen, I want to get into WEG and its growth and acquisitions, and I also happen to know from your personal bio that although you've been at WEG for 20 years, prior to that you were in other sectors outside of wealth management and had some M&A experience amongst other types of experience back then. It'll be interesting to see your perspective, especially on an industry that looks very different from when you first joined 20 years ago. That's for sure.
Yeah, that for sure.
But before we get to all of that, I want to take you back to when you were a little kid, maybe 8, 10, 12 years old. What did you want to be? Because my guess is the CEO of a fast-growing wealth management firm and an aggregator integrator. It was probably not it back then, but you tell me.
Well, it's funny. I what did I want to be when I grew up? Well, I was a really avid ski racer, so I thought I was going to be a ski racer my whole life. Right? And I'm still chasing that. I've been known to ski pretty fast these days, so I am feeling the pain of it once in a while, though, and realizing that maybe I should slow down. But it's interesting. I really wanted to be more in an entrepreneurial world. My dad. Our dads and our moms have lots of influence on us, and both my mom and dad were super entrepreneurial. And my dad worked for a company called Super Value Foods. When he joined there, it was about a $20 million company. When he finally finished, it was a $20 billion company. And they worked with independent grocery retailers, right? So time of chains were there, and his whole role was to try to provide the services to these independent retailers that the big chains had, right? So he tried to make sure that they were getting some benefit of scale, even though they were independent. And it's funny, I woke up one day and I thought, wow, I'm kind of doing the same thing. Right. And when I was a kid, in the summertime, you'd fly around to these different places and meet with these entrepreneurs and independent retailers. And every once in a while there'd be an extra seat. So he'd drag me with. And so from about the time I was 12 years old, I would be sitting in these meetings and watching, my dad interact with an independent entrepreneur and talk about how to grow and build the business. And I find that many days I'm doing that same thing, whether we're looking to buy a firm or when firms come and join us, we really want to continue that entrepreneurial energy and the way they join us and that they can continue. And so it's funny, what did I want to become? Well, I'm sort of kind of doing it in a weird way.
Right. That's funny. That's great. Yeah, there's such a parallel there. I see that. No question. Did you grow up in ski country, by the way? Is that why you were such a ski?
I grew up in snow country, definitely. So I grew up in Minnesota.
Okay.
And I raced at a little hill called Buck Hill. And my coach was a guy who was Eric Seiler. He's a legendary coach. He was in his 60s when I coached, and he's now in his, I don't know if he might kill me if I say his age, but he's maybe in his 90s and he's still coaching. Wow. And it's beautiful to watch him ski. Actually, he's got that old Austrian style. So yeah, little Buck Hill, but little known to many people, but Lindsey Vonn started there, and
sure.
She was quite a ski racer. Paula Moltzen today, who is a ski racer at the World Cup level, and so it's produced a lot of really good skiers over the years.
Love it. All right, one last question. Looking back, what was your first deal of any type that it could be early in your career, or maybe there was something younger as a kid? Anything you consider a deal?
Yeah, I've been going way back here. So my mom convinced, this is in the mid 70s, convinced 10 men, in the 70s, unfortunately or unfortunately, the world was sort of more male dominated. My dad was a pragmatic guy. He didn't understand that one way or the other. And so they were both super successful in their own way. She convinced 10 men to back her in buying a professional soccer team and brought the Minnesota Kicks they bought the Denver Dynamos and moved them to Minnesota and had a professional soccer team. And I was just a little guy. I was about 10 at the time, sort of, revealing my age. But I got to ride along and watch that whole thing transpire. And I remember opening day, we didn't expect anyone to show up for this game. And my dad, also the ticket manager, she came out and she said, "We got way too many people." We were having kind of an owner's party or something. I was tagging along, and my dad says, "We're good." And we grab a grocery bag and a bunch of tickets, and we're selling tickets. And eventually I've got a grocery bag full of cash. And I walk up to the security gate and I say, "I have to bring this cash in." And the security guard looks at me like, "Who are you, 10-year-old? I'm like a 10-year-old kid." And I go, "Look, I don't walk around with a bag of cash. This is supposed to go to the ticket office, and I don't know where I am, but please let me in, mister." And so he let me in. And so, up close and personal of deal number one.
Love it. I love it. That's amazing. All right, so let's talk about Wealth Enhancement Group a little bit. So, you joined about 20 years ago, right? I know you started as a consultant, then you became CEO. And let's actually start, give us an idea of now, how, what's been the growth by acquisition? What, kind of deals have you done? And then compare that to what WEG was like. And by the way, outside, WEG is the shorthand. Do you guys use that internally? Or?
Yeah, we use it internally. That works.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and then let's sort of compare it. I'd actually love to start now and then go back and compare it to what it was like 20 years ago when you first came in.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the founders really brought this firm together with this idea of utilizing a team-based approach. And, within that, it meant, how do you have a team-based approach to drive organic growth? Then how do you also have a team-based approach to deliver great outcomes for clients, right? Sort of thoughtful and organized and present that concept of team to the clients. And then as you think about the employees themselves, being engaged with each other is really powerful. So today we look a lot like that. And it's anchored completely. I'd love to say, gee, I came in, I founded this thing. I didn't found this company. The founders were brilliant in the way they thought about it. And they put it together in a way that really is still there today. I talk about culturally, we talk about our purpose statement. I talk about it as much as I possibly can. And it's 3-part, which is it starts off, we work together. It embraces this concept of team. And then we talk about, we work together to improve the lives of our clients. And that's like an honor. I mean, clients allow us into places that they don't allow many people into, right? I mean, start with just money, right? Money is one, just start right there. But typically that money is related to relationships and what are their aspirations and their dreams and their cares that they have. And they let us into that place. And so, we feel that's an honor. And then the third part is, we're seeking to provide the best financial advice. And of course, best is always magical, but what the real word is seeking. And those things come from the founding all the way back, but those today sit, front and center for the type of organization we're trying to be, the type of people that we're trying to bring into our organization. We want to be collaborative, right? We want to respect the independence and the drive of an independent person can deliver, but we also want to envelop them in a team and collaborative atmosphere to those ends, right? To continue to grow and learn and to try to deliver the best advice we can to improve the lives of our clients. And so that's the cultural side. What does it look like from an organizational side? If you go back, today we are driven, we'll bring in roughly $8.5 or $9 billion of flows this year. And so that's really driven primarily, about half of that is new client activity and about half of that is existing client activity. And so we've always had a very strong, from the very beginning, a strong lean in to how do we generate organic flows into the business. And so it was a marketing driven organization, which is actually my background. I was a marketer for General Mills and then I marketed another company and sold it to Procter & Gamble in the late 90s. It's one of the things I loved about the organization. It has a strong centralized marketing approach. Back to this team part, right? Is there's a team of people that are going to help an advisor to find new clients and grow, right? Advisors can ask for referrals. That's certainly part of it. But how do we explore other avenues and growth channels for them and drive that? And marketing is a really big part of that as we continue to grow. And that today is just as every bit alive as it was back 20 years ago. The M&A stuff is what we all love to talk about, right? And it's here and it is definitely present. But, I think you may have to, bleep this or whatever, but, I've stood on a stage, at bright places and I've said, M&A is a really, really shitty way to build a business. You have to make sure you have organic growth, right? Because the merry-go-round of M&A and this consolidation, it'll go on for a while. I'm not suggesting it's going to be over anytime soon, but it does end, right? We've seen it in other industries. And so fundamentally, we want to make sure we're building a great company that also happens to do M&A. We're not just an M&A shell in and of itself. And so we were driven by organic growth beforehand. We are just as driven by organic growth today because we believe that when the merry-go-round slows down or stops, that will be the driver of the business continue on a go-forward basis into the future. And so today you'd see us in a much more sophisticated marketing, very strong across the channels. You'd look at us, it'd be a multi-channel. We started off, we were a radio show driven business. And we still do the radio show. One of our founders still does it every week along with a woman named Peg Webb, and they do a great job and it's really wonderful, but we do so many more things as well, ranging all the way from marketing activity directly to clients to referral programs onto supporting our advisors with marketing overlay programs they can use to find clients out of their book. And so I'd say the sophistication has changed, but the fundamental, principles of the business haven't changed on that side. The one place that's changed is we definitely got an M&A game. I mean,
yeah. So it's interesting. Before we go, it's funny because one of the things, and regular listeners to this podcast are going to know that one of the things I say, this happens to be a podcast about deals and deal-driven growth. But one of the things I say repeatedly on this podcast, whether it's in this industry or other industries or whatever, is that, unless you are the 0.1 or 0.1% of the companies that are formed solely for the purposes of acquisition, right? You're an that's what you are. So, almost every company out there better be able to grow organically, better be able to know how to get a customer, a client, another one, or else you don't have a core business. What is interesting though, in many industries is that I think actually there are many companies that could take advantage of inorganic growth, deal-driven growth, and that could be M&A, which is mainly what we'll be talking about here, but it also could be joint ventures or strategic alliances or licensing deals or, you name it. As an additional way to strategically grow. And there are fewer companies that take advantage of that, than I think, could be. And that was, that's been the premise of this podcast since I started it over 4 years ago. So let's talk about that. At what point did WEG come to start, growing through deals, through M&A? And, what had that, and did that accelerate at a point? What point did you raise capital? Talk about that history of the side of it.
So what happened was we decided that we were going to start to use some of our marketing activity, and we said we want to go into new markets. So we were Minnesota, Iowa, kind of Western Wisconsin based. So we said, let's go to Chicago. We didn't. There's no. I think the reason was it was a cheap airline flight between Minneapolis and Chicago, and so we started our marketing activity there. We started generating leads and clients and we worked through servicing these clients remotely. And what we found was that, and even this still exists today, even if a client isn't necessarily going to come into the office, they like to know that that they're proximate to an office that they can go to. Yeah. And so it was pretty quickly after that we realized, okay, we've got new organic activity coming. We could take an advisor and build them de novo from scratch. But the fact of the matter is experience matters in this space. And really the only way that you get experience is you get into the M&A side. So we didn't get into M&A with this idea of saying, oh, we want to do a roll up and that's really attractive financially. And so therefore we're going to do a roll up. We got into it saying, we think we can create demand, but we really need to have a great partner with us to take care of that demand. And it was as simple as that. It was really started as really more of a talent acquisition. It's hard to hire a great advisor. You can occasionally, but it really comes down to the way that you bring on that servicing capability and that great talent is through M&A activity. And that was also one day we said, you know what, we need to find somebody, and we found a great advisor. And I think they were about $250 million when they joined us, and this would have been circa 2014. And I think he's closing in on $2.5 billion in assets today, and just really partnered with the organic capabilities combined with his leadership capabilities and advising capabilities have really come together nicely.
So that was back in 2014. So at that point, did you guys self-fund that deal? That was prior, to raising outside capital?
Yeah. We completely self-funded, and well, at the time we were private equity backed, right? But we funded just completely out of cash flow. I mean, today people use leverage and equity as a way to fund it just at the pace that things are going. But it was acquisition number one.
Right. Right. So let's talk a little bit about that. How has the model evolved? Obviously, we don't need to talk about any specific deals, and we've had the pleasure of doing doing the deals with you guys where we represented sellers, and they've been very happy. So talk about how the deals have evolved, and because obviously the market's evolved, and so what do the deals look like now? How have they evolved over time? Are you doing cash and equity? Are you doing what does it look like?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is we should have bought everything we possibly could have in 2014 because the multiples were a lot cheaper.
Absolutely.
Like we should have bought everything. No, it's clearly valuation has changed. For sure. And I think that's at the same time what you've seen is not only has the sort of consolidation changed, but the platform multiples have changed too, right? So it's as that's worked for the platforms, it's been shared back to the sellers within that, and pretty much in a consistent fashion all the way through. I think from a structure perspective, our approach has always been it's part cash and equity up front, and then we typically have what are the risk points? We're really looking for a shared risk profile in how we go forward with things, meaning that we share the risk, but we also are clear about where are those risk points. So, the first part in all of this is, can you transition the clients, right? So we typically do a retention component, or essentially retaining the clients at a period, that we define. Oftentimes it might be 2 years out. And so that's part of it. Then the other part is the shared upside, right? So, advisors say, well, I've got this list of clients that are about to come. And so then we create a year 2 or year 3 shared sort of, what's the growth been? The growth has been in excess of what we'd expect. And therefore, how do we share that back? And the thing that it's funny because they're deals, right? And so as soon as people think about deals, you kind of go to like, maybe you're buying a car, right? And that's a zero sum game, right? Which is you're going to charge me X and I'm going to pay that. And then we go our ways, and maybe I buy another car in a few years or whatever, but it's pretty much a zero sum game. And these, we've become partners, right? And so it's important to us that the transaction, the day that closes is always exciting, right? The check clears and all that stuff. That's always a nice moment. Really what matters is a year later, right? Are we happy to be partners together, right? Has the transaction, and part of happiness of being partners together is, was I treated fairly? Both ways, right? I mean, were we treated fairly? Were you treated fairly, right? Because if we're going to have a partnership going forward, like if you don't have that, then trust erodes, right? And all sorts of other things. And so, it's really, our goal, I always celebrate. I mean, it's nice to celebrate on day one, but really the time to celebrate is day 365 to make sure it's like, all right, we've gotten through, we've got things, it's always a little transition. We're settled. We see the future and the growth, and we're excited to move forward as partners.
I love that. And so, you've alluded to some things which might give us a hint at the answers to my next few questions, but I'm going to ask them so you can really lay it out. So, you talk in terms of advisors coming on and a year or 2 years, 3, right? So are you doing mainly deals with advisors who have a long runway? Are you doing any kind of, succession kind of deals? Or I'm assuming maybe some of them have a founder in Gen 2, set up. So, talk to us about who you're targeting, who are the ideal.
Yeah, just because, we have a strong organic growth engine and goal in terms of what we're trying to do. So, it's funny because when we first got in this, I talked to a few people like, we want to buy people who are retiring because they have the way they want to do things, and we don't want them to do that anymore. We just want the clients. And I think that's such a flawed view, right? Because what I'll say to people is, look, if we're coming together, I'd say, all right, look, you've made promises to these clients. And when we come together, they are now our collective promises. So I can't look at your client base and say, the world's a nail and I'm a hammer. I mean, like, you've made promises. And so we have to embrace those promises. Otherwise the clients will move on. And so you just can't fundamentally break those. So our view is, sometimes people retire and that happens, but we really are looking for people that have, a 5 to 10 year runway, and they are excited about growing. And in some ways, what's happened to their business is that they got in this business, it grew beyond what they ever imagined it to do because they were really good at what they're doing. But along with that came suddenly they have the burden and the overhead of dealing with that, the not so fun part of that growth, and they kind of miss out on the fun part. And so our proposition fundamentally is, hey, come on in, we'll do all we can to take all of those things that are sort of scalable, and we can take that burden off you. You can go back to really engaging with, your junior advisors and or your clients and continue to grow. And that's we like the long run.
Yeah, it makes sense. And it's interesting, because I've had a number of clients where there's, G1, G2, sometimes even G3. And, and that's often the tension with the younger advisors. And we know that unfortunately in this industry, the average age of the advisors is, up well into the 50s. So, that next generation is more rare than it should be for the health of the industry, in my mind. So those are valuable folks. And, often in those situations, the concern that G2 has about joining a place is that they think they have a lot more they can do growing on their own, right? And, the senior person wants it, it's time for them to cash out. So that's where, there is this important mesh, in a firm like yours between the organic growth opportunity and the deal opportunity, because not only are they going to get a check when they come in, but they can, they don't lose that ability to continue to grow, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we our comp model is a rev share model. So, that creates that, again, it's all about, we want to perpetuate that entrepreneurial energy. And so the comp model has to be consistent with that, right? It's hard to take an entrepreneur into a base plus bonus. Like that just doesn't feel right. Like it's like, no, it's a rev share. And you think about when you run a business effectively, net profit is a rev share, right? And so, we really want to continue that along with they continue with decisions on sort of who's on their team and how do they hire their team and things like that. So, maintaining that.
So that really leads us into an artificial distinction, because most firms have some combination, but they certainly lean one way or another. And again, you've sort of foreshadowed where I think this answer is going to go. But we've been talking to a lot of the folks in this series about this conversation of aggregator versus integrator, right? And there are some firms that, the models are more. In fact, there are some firms where, it's people maintain their own ADV, and it's they really have their own firm. And then there's other models where it's fully integrated. Not only are you on the ADV, but it's the same tech stack, the same whatever, and even the same investment philosophy. And you have to fit your practice and translate your practice into the model that firm is running. So, on the aggregator integrator spectrum, give us an idea of where you guys.
Well, if I redefine it, is that okay? So we look at the world as, we think there's really the financing model and the financial model, right? So that's kind of, where they're going to come in, they're going to buy part of your EBOC, they might have a pref on it, but you got your own ADV, right? And look, there's a number of different players there. That's, the benefits of that is, there's not a lot of integration. In fact, there's really no integration other than maybe some compliance things like that. Great for independence, not so great for, if you believe scale matters in some ways, not so great from that perspective. On the other side, what I would call is there's a distribution model, right? And that's kind of how you describe, like, there is a way we do things here, and that is the way you're going to do things. And, that actually is strong on the scale side, right? But it, from my vantage point, it looks like it violates a little bit of the, look, you've made promises to your clients, and, it gets a little bit more towards, when Ford, he said you can have the car any color you want, it's just going to be black. Right. So, and I don't think they're not like that tight. Our model, we view in the middle as sort of a partnership model, which is, we believe there are places where where custom doesn't matter to the benefit of the client. And those are places to scale, right? Not everything has to be bespoke. And so how do we take those places and create scale where we either have mass customization, or we find the efficiency such that there's room left over to do the art of the relationship and where the unique part has to be in that. And so we take off a ton from a scale perspective, but our compensation model is rev share, right? So it's more that entrepreneurial, touching into that, a little bit more of that financing model, right? We want to find people who still have lots of runway left. We still give them the power to sort of make their hiring decisions around the team that's serving them. And they have choices from an investment perspective within that. And so they can tap into scaled solutions or not, their decision, right? They can do the custom work locally, or they can tap into the scale solutions, whatever is the best way to meet the objectives of those clients for them and go within it. And so where do we sit on that continuum? Look, we're definitely an integrator on the parts where you can pull out that scale and that efficiency. And we do it so that at the end of the end of that line, or where you get to that, there's resource left over to do the bespoke and custom that the client needs to have.
Love it. Great. Let's take a break from the show for a minute so I can invite you to a new way to determine your deal readiness. I created a fast and easy assessment that will determine exactly how deal ready you are. Once you complete the assessment, I use your responses to identify the obstacles that are holding you back from being a deal-driven growth genius. It's as easy as heading to CoreyKupfer.com/assessment. That's CoreyKupfer.com/assessment and filling out a few multiple choice questions. I'll be checking in after the episode to see what your results are. Now back to the show. So let's talk about, give folks an idea of the number of deals, the volume of deals, you do. Obviously, there are some folks out there that are doing, a deal or two a year. There's some that are, really, have been unbelievably active, and there are arguments for both, whether it's time in the market, competition, ability to integrate or lack thereof. Some of it depends upon the model that you're running, right?
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about where you guys are in terms of, deal volume.
Yeah, you'll see this year we'll do somewhere between probably 18 and 22 deals, roughly, plus or minus. I mean, still early yet, right? But I mean, in terms of where we see it and what we're trying to do, we're quite active. We're in the marketplace, every day, having conversations with everyone in the space. And when we look for, we're just looking for great alignment to what we're trying to do, and we talk about these different models that I sort of shared there. And if we meet somebody, we can kind of we listen to them and say, what you're really looking for is this over here or that, and help shape them there. But in terms of activity and growth, we continue to be really aggressive. We've been the other thing I would say about our acquisition approach is that I talked about our purpose statement when we started here, which is we work together. One of the things that we've done is we've clustered our acquisitions. We some firms say they come in and say we're not clustering, we're all over the place. Well, if we believe that team and partnership matters, then you kind of have to see some teammates, right? And so, we've clustered very much. After the Midwest, we went right to New York, actually, and we're really aggressive in that space, and then worked our way, next stops down Philadelphia, Baltimore, et cetera, and then Boston as well. And so, same thing. We recently went to California. We're going on, I think, 2 years now, and we've been, incredibly active in Northern and Southern California. And it's this idea that says, look, we believe scale matters. We believe the scale of ideas and collaboration matter. And, as people come in, they start to see, I can throw a question out to all the advisors here. Actually, we have an open sort of channel on that, and they'll get a bunch of answers. And it's great. Sometimes they get, they'll get responses at like 2 a.m. from somebody. And I just, and I read these and I just love it. And so it's this idea of manifesting team, both for the joy of the job, but ultimately to the benefit of the client.
Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about your capital partners. That's something obviously that, we alluded to it earlier. You and I mean, I've been doing stuff in this industry. In fact, we did a deal end of last year, November of last year, for the first advisor I ever helped break from anywhere, which was 24 years ago out of US Trust. And we did a very nice exit deal or more partnership with another one of the models. Actually, that was with Evidence Public, so that was with Charity Partners, who has a partnership model, as well. And so that was, very personally satisfying for me to, have it come that full circle. But the reason I raised that much more so is just that, it was such a different, 20 years ago, 24 years ago, it was such a different time. And there were no capital partners practically. There was not even lending in the space. I remember I had a bank client I was trying to convince to get into the space as a lender because I thought it was such a good opportunity. He had bought one RIA firm and then the 2008 crisis hit and they ignored it because they were focusing on their core business. Right. You're in the wrong business. Don't bank purchase of RIAs usually don't go well. Get it, but you should lend in this way. You just provide capital. It's a great space. In any case, so obviously it's a whole different game now, and there are major players involved, and it's gotten where even the the sellers, the counterparties, are looking at who the capital partners are, right, and then also align with what are the expectations there, right? Because outside capital comes with expectations, and is the plan that you're going to go public? Is the plan you can be around? So, it's not to mention any names, but Goldman Sachs can gobble you up when you can't raise further capital, et cetera, et cetera. I say that half kiddingly, but it's true. Those are things that concern folks. So talk to us about your capital partners and what sort of the vision is and expectations.
Yeah. So we have 2 capital partners, TA Associates. They've been in the private equity space for I think 50 years. Your partners, and then Onyx, who's been around for a long time as well, Canadian-based firm, both seasoned and experienced in financial services. And so I think if I'm a seller, you definitely want to understand who those capital partners are. What is their approach? What's their reputation and knowledge within the space? We've had 4 private equity firms. We started with Norwest Equity Partners back in 2007, actually on the eve of the great financial crisis, and they were exactly the kind of partner I needed at that time. I'd worked with PE before I got into the space. And I think the messages are not all the same, right? They have different models. Like you look at Norwest Equity Partners has historically, they've been more in the manufacturing space, came into the service space. Well, why were they important to us? They helped us mature as an organization. We were this is back in 2008. When we came to 2014, we had done our first acquisition and we were looking to do more. Lightyear Capital, which was run by, was founded by Don Marin. I learned more in a 5-minute conversation with Don Marin. He built Payne Weber, and he'd run the playbook in a different space. And the intellectual capital that they gave to us from an acquisition, starting our acquisition activity was really powerful and really aligned. And then as we went to TA, we built our platforms and we're ready to go. TA is a growth equity firm, right? And that was exactly the right type of firm. We had built the capabilities of stability in terms of being able to execute. And then now it was time to do it at scale and speed. And so, the key is, it's not just who is the private equity firm, but why are they aligned? Where are they aligned with, the company itself in terms of what the company is trying to do? That really matters. Because if there's a conflict there in the forward vision, that's when things go awry, right? People always have this vision that the private equity space is deeply involved in the business, and it's just like, if they're deeply involved, that usually means it's not going well.
The problem, right?
These partners, they're on 6 to 8 different, portfolio companies, boards. They're busy, right? And they're looking for the next deal, or they're taking a deal to market, or whatever it might be. Like they're not, they don't, what they want to do is they want to, they feed people, they make money in a couple of basic ways: raise capital, deploy it well, harvest. Nowhere in there is operate company or even bug CEO. It just isn't part of it. Like, there's just none of that, right? And so, if you run your company in a way that you have tight, we have very tight sort of controls around how we have expense management. That comes from my brand management days at General Mills. Actually, I just saw one of my buddies from General Mills recently. I told him I was still running the same financial add-up process that we used at General Mills, and it's tight and it's transparent all the way to the board, right? They're great. They see everything, and I think the key when you're working with capital partners that I have is I tell them, here's what we're trying to do. And then I come back and say, well, here's where I screwed up. Like, let me just tell you where I failed first. Oh yeah, we have some really good news too, but here's where we failed, and here's what I'm doing about it. And they're like, okay, got it. It's when you don't bring that transparency and you don't have that alignment, and again, that's where I think if I'm a seller, I look and say, what is the vision of the company? How does that align with what that PE firm looks like? And then just generally, what's my sense of how they have that relationship, and if they're aligned and they're transparent, PE firms are working with their other portfolio companies because there's always trouble somewhere.
So what is the vision and the plan for WAG, and the PE firms, and obviously somebody coming in, there's an equity piece, right? So part of what, one of the things that I really push with my clients is that they should be looking at a transaction with a firm like yours as 2 deals. One deal is the buyout of their piece for the cash they're getting, right? And then they should be treating the equity portion as if they got the cash value of that as well. And now they're making an investment decision, right? Because that's really what they're doing. We're just skipping a step, right? If they're getting 10 to 20% or whatever the number is of their, of their piece in equity, they've essentially, made an investment decision. And a lot of people, unfortunately, sort of skip over that. And listen, it's one thing if you're getting enough cash where you think the equity's gravy, okay, maybe, but still, you should be looking at it as an investment decision. So when people are making that investment decision, either consciously, hopefully, or subconsciously in WAG by taking equity, what is the value proposition of that? Are they playing for an exit? Is there ways they monetize that? If they retire, what's the model there?
Well, I mean, that's a great thing about PE partners, right? Is that, as you think about someone coming and selling is, the third part of that is they harvest their investments, right? Yeah, they sell. And so, that's what I think is great, because they're going to have a liquidity cadence every, period of years, right? And that's great for someone coming in, a seller, right? Because you're coming in as a seller, you're going to be a minority partner, most likely in the firm, which means you don't really have control. So, if you go in and the CEO has all the control, he or she may never sell, right? Well, I don't have a choice. Like we'll create, what I always say, we open up our company to the markets one day out of every 5 years, right? Which is everyone's going to be able to sell or buy or whatever within that day, and that's really the nature of it. And so I think I'm a big fan of the PE space. You got to make sure you get the right partner.
Sure.
I think that as you look at us, I don't have any great need to be public. I mean, I think the markets kind of talk. I mean, some recent transactions that have been announced sort of about public space. The private space has definitely valued this space in a better way for companies than the public space has. I think some of that has to do with when you think about the maturity of the space itself. When I think about the maturity, the process maturity, when I was at a place like General Mills, or I sold the company, actually to one of the companies I was with, I sold to Procter & Gamble, versus the process maturity of where the RIA space is. I think we have a ways to go before we're sort of, totally set where the public space will be comfortable with it. And so I think that's out there, but, I think in some ways the public space might be ego driven to some extent for people. My view is I'm here to lead this company for the stakeholders, right? Which is our shareholders, our clients, and our employees. And my job is to figure out what's the best capital market for us to be getting our capital from. And I think the private space has a really long runway. If you look, the corollary would be, if people are sort of wondering why would he say that, I would look to the insurance brokerage business. They're about a decade ahead of us in terms of this roll-up process. 50-50 on public versus private. And then we're talking about large private deals in terms of where they're. I mean, we're talking $1.5 billion to $2 billion EBITDA businesses that are still in the private space. And so my view of the world is if the public market makes sense, we'll go there. But for right now, the private market makes sense. And I think there's a lot of runway left with it.
Yeah. That sort of leads me to, I want to talk a little bit about, these trends and what we're seeing in the market and et cetera. But, something that I've said on other episodes of this special series is that, whereas, and we've alluded to it here, whereas, in the 20 plus years you and I have both been involved in this industry, we've come a long, long way from where it was. But I still think we're in maybe, the third inning of a 9-inning, game. When you look, you and I both have the benefit of having spent time in other industries. I still have clients in other industries. And, I've seen, there's been huge maturation compared to where it was, but compared to, where it could go, there's, in my mind, a long way to go.
Yeah, I agree. I think I always think of it, it's funny because I think about it in the same way of like sort of what inning you're in. I kind of think we're in the early middle innings, kind of, and the reason I think, initially it was kind of like everyone could do deals. And, I think if you're a seller today, there's a dozen or so companies that have gotten really good at this. And the blessing for you to wait is kind of two-part. One is the valuations have gotten better. The other part is, the first firm we bought, the poor soul. Now it's gone really well, and he is awesome, but and near and dear friend and partner. But I would say, our first deal, not so good.
the efficiency or lack thereof of the integration, right? Well, listen, there's nobody I know of who has a first deal that they're like, oh yeah, it went perfectly.
Yeah, really swimmingly. Yeah, yeah. And I think as you fast forward, we've honed it in ways, any good firm, right? They're going to look at it, they're going to examine, they're going to improve the process, they're going to see what the issues are and create a better outcome for everybody. And so I think we're in that stage where, that's really happening. And I think I talk about chapter 1 and chapter 2 type M&A. Chapter 1 is really what you see going on today. I think as you look at other industries, chapter 2 is when you start to get the integrators, the aggregate, they start rolling each other up, right? And, we'll have that. And I think, if you're a firm, the reason why people are doing process maturity is partly because you want to make it a better outcome for the people you're bringing today. But the other thing is like, look, today there's essentially a multiple arbitrage in terms of what's happening to this. And then there's a growth arbitrage, right? Come join us. I mean, typically our firms, their net flows go up about 200 to 300 basis points after they join us. And so, there's a growth arbitrage. Down the road, when you get the big guys consolidating the big guys and things like that, that's a synergy, right? So all firms, if you're looking for winners in these firms, just make sure that you're looking and say, is this a firm committed to maturing as an organization and thinking about efficiency and productivity in a way that they'll be the winner in that chapter 2 as well?
Let's talk a little bit about other things around the trend. So on the one hand, there's a lot of positive that's happening certainly in this industry in terms of everything we just talked about, the maturization, the growth, the ecosystems that's been built around this, the fact that despite the fact that we've had quote unquote consolidation, the independent space has grown because we still have a huge flow of banks coming out of other platforms, RIA houses, things like that, IBDs, banks, trust companies, insurance companies, that kind of stuff. So, we still have great inflow, into the space. But, on the flip side, obviously, at least in the short term, there's been some headwinds here. Interest rates going up significantly has affected cost of capital, concerns about inflation. Obviously, very recently, we've had, some of the bank failures, which have, caused concern. So what are you seeing in terms of the impact, if any, on deal flow, on valuations? How have the deals changed? How have the deal flow changed, if at all? And, what's your view on the short, medium, and long term, in terms of this M&A in the space?
Yeah, I think, I'll try to take it from the top on that and go through all that. So I think, so interest, kind of the interest rate change, right? I mean, it's just math, right? It changes the value of firms, right? We all, experience in the public markets, right? And it has an impact on valuation in this space. And so, I think we've seen values come down a little, not tons, right? But we've seen a little bit more as there's a little bit more at risk for both sides. So it's a way to say, look, this, if we all believe the yield curve, right, this is going to pass, and therefore, let's share that risk together and create sort of a overall still ability to hit the number, but probably a little bit more at risk. And I think that's, I've seen that pretty widespread within the space. I think in terms of, as you think about the more recent events, I think the macro forces that are at work are so powerful that it's just pushing, it's pushing people to sell and despite the headwinds. We used to have this belief that if the equity markets were down 20, people would stop selling. Yeah. I would say, we tested that, a year ago, and we didn't see much of a slowdown. What we saw effectively, we didn't see crossover in terms of what buyers were willing to pay and what sellers were willing to sell for. And then it took a while to get that adjusted. But we didn't see it slow down in terms of participants. And I think that as you continue to look forward, that's going to happen. The drivers, right? I mean, it's partly demographics, right? There's some of that's demographics. Part of it is scale. People are starting to understand how scale matters, and they see it in it. The technology, the continual amount of technology you need to bring forward to meet the needs of your clients is, getting harder for smaller firms to meet with that. And as you continue to have those pressures, there's just going to continue to be this pressure of sale.
Yeah. Yeah. I sort of feel the same way. We've seen that deal flow slow. Just ever, so slightly. But then again, last year was ridiculous. We were like, last 2 years were crazy. But more what we've seen is just give some restructuring, like you said, putting some more, more on the earn out or whatever, just, and what I like is that, I think, and sellers sometimes don't realize this, is that, buyers they're very willing to pay for the revenue and even, if it's actually going to come in, right? So if the market's down, all right, we're not going to pay you for that now, but we'll pay you for it later if it comes back. So there's often a way, people focus sometimes on just on the multiple numbers when deal structure really matters. And in fact, there's an old joke, right, in the deal world, whether it's lawyers or bankers or whatever, that give me a price, I'll give you a structure. Give me a structure, I'll give you a price. What? You want 10 times as much as your firm is valued now? I can go with a structure where I can may take years to get paid, but it's like, so yeah. But I do see more adjustment in deal structure, and you're right. I agree. I think the drivers are so. The outlook for this industry, especially, we got a long way to go, and there's plenty more deals to be done. So, all right, as we come to the end of our time here, before I ask you my final couple of questions, Is there anything about Wealth Enhancement Group or model or anything we haven't covered that you want to share?
I think we've covered it pretty much. I mean, we're a firm. We want that entrepreneurial energy as we look at folks, and we kind of talk about those three types of models. We're a lean in growth company, always have been. You kind of asked how did it change? I mean, that has never changed. We actually got into the M&A game a little bit late. You might have to bleep out the way I expressed about M&A.
No, it's all good. This, although it's not a lot of it, we don't bleep out explicit content, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough way to build a business, but the reality is, it is the forces. We don't get to control the macro forces as to what's happening. Right, as scale matters right now, the capital is in the business, and so we took that as a challenge to say, okay, we don't get to control the external world, but we want to build a great company here that all our stakeholders are proud to be part of, both for how they enjoy it as part of an organization and what we ultimately deliver to our clients. And we continue to drive it every day. I mean, it's, there's always some curveball being thrown at us, somewhere, somehow, but we continue to go forward with that.
Love it. So if people want to, somebody may be interested in finding out more about WAG in general, or as a potential, partner or seller to you, what's the best place for them to find out more information?
Yeah. So Jim Kahn heads up our corporate development activity. Great team. And he's the key guy to contact. And,
sounds good.
We'll create a great exploratory for anybody that wants to come and talk to us.
Love it. Jeff, my final question of the podcast is always about my highest value in life, which is freedom. And for me, that means everything from freedom around the world for world people, from oppression to why I've been an entrepreneur for decades and haven't had a boss. What does freedom mean to you, and how does it impact your life and business?
It's great. I think about it. It's funny you sort of asked that. So I was just talking last night with a friend of mine about decisions that my ancestors made. Right, my family's from Norway. I've been to the homestead where it was. It's just a beautiful place. And this was in the middle of the 19th century. And I remember sitting there thinking, why did my great-great-grandfather leave this beautiful place? But you know what? Thank goodness he did. And Norway is a wonderful place, but the opportunity that has been provided to my family and those decisions that were made before have been really powerful. And a lot of that has been, that was coming to the United States and pursuing our entrepreneurial interest and trying to grow companies along the way and chase a meaningful life.
Jeff Dekko, thank you for being such a great guest on the DealQuest podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of DealQuest, where we help you understand how deal-driven growth can be your ticket to freedom. I want to invite you to a unique way to tap into the wisdom and experience of the DealQuest community. Join the DealQuest Deal Den Zoom calls, a free monthly 90-minute mastermind. In the mastermind, we address all the challenges you may be facing and help support you with the opportunities that may arise in terms of deal-driven growth. You will get input not only from me, but all the members on the call will collaborate and serve each other in a mastermind format. To sign up for the free mastermind, go to www.corykupfer.com/dealden. That's corykupfer.com/dealden. I'll see you there. I'm Corey Kupfer. Until next week, wishing you the freedom and financial prosperity that I know your DealQuest will bring.